My name is Natalie. I'm 38 years old, and last summer my family left me at a highway rest stop in the middle of our vacation. For nearly an hour, my mother insisted it had been an accident. Then my nephew sent me a message. Aunt Natalie, I'm sorry. They knew you were still inside. That was the moment I stopped wondering how my entire family could forget me and started wondering why they had decided I deserved to be left behind. The trip had been Mom's idea. She wanted all of us together for 4 days in the Smoky Mountains. My parents, my younger sister Brooke, her husband, their 2 children, and me. I almost said no. Family vacations had never really felt like vacations for me. I was usually the one checking reservations, finding restaurants, remembering medications, carrying extra chargers, and making sure nobody forgot anything important. But Mom promised this trip would be different. No one is putting you in charge, she told me. Just come and enjoy your family. So I did. I booked my own room, paid my share of the rental van and cabin, and made one decision before we left. I was not going to manage everyone else's vacation. For the first day, it worked. The problem started the next morning. Brooke came into the kitchen while I was making coffee and asked what time I planned to be back that afternoon. I told her probably around 5. I had booked a guided hike on a trail I had wanted to see for years. She looked confused. But we have the winery tour today. I know. So who's staying with the kids? I stared at her. I assumed you already arranged that. She laughed like I had made a joke. No, I thought you were staying here. I asked why. Because you're not doing anything with us. I reminded her that I had just told her I had plans. Her expression changed. Natalie, it's only a few hours. Her son could mostly entertain himself, but her daughter still needed an adult with her. Brooke and her husband had booked an adults-only activity without asking me first, then treated my free time like it already belonged to them. I told her no. Mom heard us and came into the room. Brooke immediately said, Natalie doesn't want to help. I wasn't asked until 5 minutes ago. Mom gave me that familiar disappointed look. It's one afternoon. It's also the one thing I planned for myself. Dad, without looking up from his phone, said, sometimes family comes before plans. That sentence stayed with me. Apparently family came before my plans. Just not before Brooke S. I still went hiking. Brooke stayed back with the kids while her husband went on the winery tour alone because the tickets were non-refundable. When I returned that evening, Brooke barely spoke to me. Mom was polite but cold. I asked once if something was wrong. She said nothing, we're on vacation, let's not create drama. So I let it go. The next morning, we were driving toward a scenic overlook when Dad stopped at a large travel center off the interstate. Everyone got out. I used the restroom, bought water, then stood in line for coffee. When I walked back outside, the van was gone. At first I thought Dad had moved it. I checked the front lot. Nothing. Then the side lot. Still nothing. I called Mom. No answer. Dad. No answer. Brooke. Voicemail. I opened our family group chat. Where are you? No response. I'm outside, the van is gone. Still nothing. About 15 minutes later, Mom finally called. Her voice was strangely calm. Oh, Natalie, we're already back on the highway. I asked how everyone had gotten into the van, and nobody noticed I was missing. She said Dad thought I was already in the back. I reminded her that I had been sitting beside my nephew. Then her explanation changed. Well, maybe Brooke thought you were getting another ride. I had never said that. Dad got on the phone and told me they had gone too far to turn around immediately. I asked how far. There was a pause. Maybe 20 minutes. They had been driving for 20 minutes while I stood alone beside a highway. I told him to come back. He said traffic was heavy and they would turn around when they found somewhere convenient. Then he said, just calm down. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I was asking why my family had driven away without me. I went back inside. An employee had noticed me walking around outside and asked if I needed help. I told her my family had left without me. She looked at me for a second. All of them? Yes. She helped me find a local car service that could take me back toward our cabin. I texted Mom, "Don't come back, I have my own ride." Suddenly, everyone became available. Mom replied immediately, "Natalie, don't be ridiculous." Brooke called next. She said Mom had already explained that it was an accident. I asked Brooke what exactly the accident had been. She said Dad thought I was in the van. I said, "Mom told me you thought I was getting another ride." Silence. Then Brooke said everyone was confused. 6 people in the van. 1 empty seat. A nephew who had been sitting next to me. And somehow everyone was confused. I stopped arguing. By the time I got back to the cabin, my family was already there. Mom was waiting in the living room. Instead of apologizing, she said I had made everything harder by arranging my own ride. Dad said they had been planning to come back. Brooke said nothing. I looked at my nephew. "Did you notice I wasn't in the van?" Brooke cut in immediately. "Don't involve him." That answer told me enough. I went upstairs and closed my door. About 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was my nephew. "Aunt Natalie, I'm sorry." Then another message appeared. "They knew you were inside." I stared at the screen. Then he sent one more. "Grandma said we should drive for a little while because you needed to understand that family should help each other." My stomach dropped. I asked him what happened. He said the moment everyone got into the van, he told them I was still inside getting coffee. Mom told Dad to start driving anyway. Brooke said she has her phone, she'll be fine. My nephew thought they were going to circle the parking lot. They didn't. They got back on the interstate. The plan, according to him, had been to drive for a few minutes, let me panic, then return. They wanted to teach me a lesson because I had refused to cancel my hike and babysit. That was why nobody answered my first calls. They wanted me to feel what it was like, as Mom put it, when family couldn't count on you. What made it worse was that they had not even agreed on the same lie afterward. Mom said Brooke thought I had another ride. Brooke said Dad thought I was already in the van. Dad acted like everyone simply forgot. But my nephew had heard the real conversation. They had not forgotten me. They had discussed me. They had deliberately driven away. And they had ignored my calls because answering too quickly would have ruined the lesson. If you've ever been the dependable person in your family, the one everyone assumes will say yes, tell me in the comments what finally made you stop. And if stories like this feel familiar, subscribe to Real Stories of Women. I saved my nephew's messages, but I did not show them to anyone. I did not want Brooke blaming her son for telling me the truth. Instead, I packed. The next morning, Dad saw my suitcase near the door. "Where are you going?" "I rented a car. I'm finishing the trip on my own." Mom looked shocked. "You're leaving over one mistake." It wasn't a mistake. Nobody answered. "You've all given me different explanations. None of them match. I know you left me deliberately." Brooke looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. Then Mom tried to drag the argument back to the day before. "You have no idea how hurt Brooke was when you refused to help." Brooke was allowed to be disappointed. She was not allowed to punish me. Dad said nobody was punishing anyone. And that was when Brooke exposed them. "Dad, we were supposed to turn back much sooner." The room went silent. Brooke realized what she had just admitted. I did not need to show anyone the messages. Their own story had collapsed. Mom finally said it was only supposed to be a few minutes. I asked why. She looked at me. "To make a point." That was the first honest answer anyone had given me. I picked up my suitcase. Brooke told me I was overreacting. I asked her one question. If someone deliberately left your daughter somewhere because they were angry with her, would you call it a lesson? She had nothing to say. I spent the final 2 days of the trip by myself. They were the best 2 days of the entire vacation. I drove the scenic route I wanted to see. I ate when I was hungry. I stopped checking whether everyone else had what they needed. And for the first time, I saw my role in the family clearly. When I helped, I was dependable. When I said yes, I was generous. But when I said no, suddenly I was selfish. After we got home, Mom called several times. Her first apology was terrible. "We just wanted you to understand how Brooke felt." I told her that was not an apology. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time she said, "We were angry, and we convinced ourselves that scaring you was justified. It was. We should never have done it." I accepted the apology. I did not return to the old arrangement. I stopped organizing family trips. I stopped automatically saying yes when Brooke needed childcare. I stopped being the person everyone assumed would fix the problem. Months later, Mom suggested another family vacation. Before I could answer, she added, "Everyone will make their own plans. Natalie is not responsible for anyone else." I still declined. Not because I wanted revenge. I just wasn't ready. Being left at that rest stop did teach me something. Just not what my family intended. People who love you are allowed to be disappointed when you say no. They can disagree with your boundary. They can even be angry. But the moment they decide your boundary deserves punishment, the problem is no longer your boundary. It is their belief that loving you gives them authority over you. My family left me beside a highway because I refused to give up one afternoon. They thought being stranded would teach me to be more helpful. Instead, it taught me that I was allowed to stop being useful every second of the day. I was allowed to say no. And I was allowed to walk away from anyone who thought my no deserved punishment. That was the last family vacation where I was treated like the person responsible for everyone else. Strangely enough, being left behind was what finally taught me to stop leaving myself behind.